Hello everyone and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 5.58, and in this lesson I'm going to cover the various expression controls that we have inside of the Polysynth and one that's outside of the Polysynth, which is the pitchbend, which you'll find inside of the inspector panel here. So in order to get this to work, you actually have to have a MIDI keyboard or some kind of MIDI device that has velocity sensitivity, a mod wheel, and aftertouch. Lucky enough, I do have one sitting next to me. The truth is, I don't really use MIDI keyboards that often. There's some people who they really need them because they like to play parts in and they like to have nuanced performances when they're actually making their music. For me, I'm not too worried about that. I'm definitely not any kind of piano or keyboard whiz. If I could go back and tell my 13-year-old self to not quit the keyboard lessons, maybe I would, but the truth is, for what I make and for my own style, I like to just use automation most of the time to really dial things in exactly as I'd like. Sometimes it's nice to have that live feel of performance, but unless you're pretty good at using the keyboard and the expression controls, it may not be for you. So it's all in the player, not necessarily a requirement by any stretch of the imagination. Also, it just takes a lot of time to learn how to play a MIDI keyboard. A MIDI keyboard is quite different to an actual piano, and the response of the keys is going to be quite different. And it does take time to learn your MIDI keyboard, even if you're a great piano player, so that you can actually get some nuance out of this thing. But let's start with the most obvious place, which is pitchbend, and most people have a pitchbend control on their MIDI keyboard. I think probably all of them do. And what pitchbend allows us to do is to play a note, and as you'd expect, to bend that note. Now, inside of the inspector panel, if we're selected onto the right track, if we have an instrument track, we can adjust the pitchbend right here. So maybe I'd want to really push this out. We can go all the way up to 24 both directions. All the way down to just one semitone. We can even change the range on opposite sides, which is kind of fun. So if I record something in here, what you'll notice is if I go to automation and I go in here and I go to MIDI and to pitchbend, we're not going to see anything. And that's because with these instruments like the Polysynth, the pitchbend is hardwired into the clip itself. So what I can do is I can double click on the clip, and now we have our MIDI editor open, and we can already see what we've done here. So let me just pull this down for right now. And we're in a mode where we can actually see these changes, but if I was to click this button here, we would just see a line. If I click it, we're able to edit it, and we can take a listen back. Like so. Now maybe I wasn't really happy with that performance and there's something else I want to do completely. I can always go in here, delete these, and just by clicking I can add various breakpoints. So we'll just add a bunch and now just randomly move this around. This is controlling the snap to semitones. If I don't want that on, I can just click it and now you'll see that we're going all over the place. But let's keep that snap mode on quickly and just go up and down. We can take this again up by 2 octaves or down by 2 octaves. And you guys have all heard this effect a number of times, so there are no secrets here. And here's what we have. You can also add curves by clicking the option button, highlighting one of these and doing a little curve action just for fun. Looks like a Miro painting. So that's lots of fun. But just remember that this is where your pitchbend control is going to be, in the clip itself. And now if I turn this off, we just have the line, and now we're able to make new notes like so. And if we want to then do some expression to this note, we'd have to turn this, enable it back on, zoom into our note here, and then we can add that additional expression. Okay, very, very simple stuff, and I'm sure you guys already know a number of ways you can use that. So the next thing we can look at is velocity sensitivity. Right now, if I'm playing keys, even if I hit them at different amounts of pace or force, we're getting exactly the same amplitude. The most common usage of velocity sensitivity is to the output control, and we do have a hardwired velocity sensitivity to output here in our Polysynth. And I can bring this up, and this is going to determine the range of velocity sensitivity. So if I pull this up to like 15, for example, if I just barely touch the note, or if I slam it, the difference there will be 15 decibels. So it's kind of setting the dynamic range for our performance. I could crank it all the way up if I want to have a super dynamic performance. This is 30 dB. And this is where you have to be super nuanced with your performing, which obviously I'm not. And now let's just record something in. Perfect. And again, if I go in here and I'm looking at my MIDI, and typically I think velocity is probably like one of these early ones here in the CC, we're not going to see anything. And what I have to do is I have to double click this yet again. I need to open up my expression section. I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the pitch bend since I don't need to deal with that. And to open up the expression section, you're going to click this very bottom little box here. And by default, it is set to velocity. So now if I play back, I could go in here and I could change these around if there's something that's gone horribly wrong. And the one time I will go and do this is like if I'm recording in a drum pattern, like hi-hats, and I do like to have a lot of velocity sensitivity, but chances are I won't get it just right, so I'll have to go in and make a few tweaks there. So we can go ahead and just delete this. Up next, we have, or actually I can show you guys else what velocity can be controlled for. So by default, this is set to be controlling the output volume, but we can also route the velocity control to anything inside of the synthesizer. Sadly, I don't believe we can route it to anything in our effects section. Hopefully that's coming up soon. But let's say I want to control the filter frequency here. So I'm going to set my velocity. I'm going to pull this up. All right, so now when I play a really soft note, our frequency is going to stay at this level. But the harder I hit the note, the more this filter frequency is going to open up. So you guys can see that like so, and you could route that to anything. And sometimes just subtle bits of that on something like, let's say, I'm going to clear this first. A subtle bit of that on something like resonance can be really profound and really beneficial. Right now you're not hearing it because it's not that much. So something like that might be cool, but you could even take it to extremes and have it mess with like this shape. All right, so you can see how that can work. You could do a lot with that if you wanted. Let's go ahead and clear that. And just as a reminder, if we record in yet again, if I also had some of this routed to volume, it's going to control both. And then if we went into the clip and we were making changes, it's going to control both the volume and that relative shape on our oscillator. Okay, so just be aware of that as well. Moving right along, we have the key tracking function, and this one isn't relevant to the actual playing of the keyboard. However, it is still a pretty cool control. So we have a key tracking that's by default routed to the filter. This way, as you play up the filter, the sound will become brighter as you play up to try to mimic real acoustic instruments, and also just to keep that harmonic content somewhat similar. And we've talked about this with the filter a lot. So if I really pull this up, we can hear how that's very dull. Let me just clear this guy out. But as I play up the keyboard, we're not going to just lose everything as compared to if this is pulled all the way down. We can barely hear much. And I've already shown you that when we've looked at the spectrum before. But this key tracking could also be used on any parameter inside of the synthesizer. So again, we could use this to shape. So now... So that's really, really cool and something worth checking out as well. So that seems to be routed if you put it all the way up to like 25 notes or so. That's what I have on this keyboard, and that seems to be how that's working. So if you put it at the max there, it's going to be by 24 or 25, I should say, notes. Okay, up next we have the timbre control, and the timbre control, again, is not something that's routed with the keyboard. But what we can do with timbre is if I route this to frequency, is that if I play in something, if I play a passage in here, we could double click on this, go back into our expression controls, select timbre, and now check this out. We can do a whole lot of crazy movement per note. We could pull it up. We could do some bends. We can do whatever we want. Okay, and so this is controlling the filter frequency. All right, so let's take a listen to that and watch it on the Polysynth. So I'm not sure how often you're going to want to use that, but you can. It can add some extra bit of movement into your sounds if you're willing to go in there and mess around with that timbre control. So that's kind of a cool little feature, but not something I'd probably use that often. Again, I just prefer having my modulation options. We also have our mod wheel. So our mod wheel is on most MIDI keyboards. And what I'm going to use is have this mod wheel control the filter frequency. So when my mod wheel is all the way up at the top, this is wide open. I can select it, have it pull the frequency all the way down. Or actually, I might have to do this in the opposite direction. Let's see. I want to do this the opposite way, so I'm going to clear that. I'll pull this all the way down, select mod wheel, yank that right up to the top. Let's record something in with the mod wheel. Maybe if we want to get fancy, we could also route the mod wheel into the resonance. All right, let's just record something so we can see where this shows up. So if I double click this, we're not going to see modwheel down here. Where are we going to find that? In this case, we're actually going to find it in the automation. So that's where this gets a little bit different and strange. And it's going to be under CC1. Typically, CC1 is mapped to the modwheel. And there you see our movements that we've made. And you can make any adjustments you want. Like so. So very simple. And now you just have to be careful though, because when you delete the clip, this automation is going to stay here. So you need to go in and then delete that automation just to be on the safe side. All right, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to unmap these modwheel controls. Let's go ahead and clear that. Clear the timbre as well. And we'll clear the resonance. And last but not least, we have aftertouch. Okay, so aftertouch is on a keyboard. When you press a note, if you have the ability to press down harder, that lets you know that you have aftertouch. So this isn't something that's on every single MIDI keyboard, but on most MIDI keyboards that are over $100 or so, you'll find this feature. It gives us that same kind of ability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the aftertouch to control filter frequency. Maybe we'll have it control this shape, control the sub, control the sync, just to take it in a really crazy direction. So now if I play, that's when the aftertouch is kicking in. So I'm just playing along. I'm just applying a little bit of extra pressure. So let's record this in. Very cool. And again, if I double click in here and we load up our expression controls, we're not going to see anything. We're going to have to go into this guy, and we may not even be able to find where this is. I'm not 100% sure where the aftertouch is linked to. I thought it might be channel pressure, but I don't think that's even the case. Very interesting. I thought I just tried to record that in. Let's try one more time. And what I think I might have had to do is clear this channel pressure to begin with. And we'll try this again and see if it works. So you can tell I run into snafus all the time. So there seems to be like a bit of an error here. It's not actually recording that, and I don't know why. But that is the function of aftertouch, and you can hear that when I'm actually doing it, it works, but it doesn't seem to record in as automation, at least not for me at this point. So be very careful with that. And if you want to set things with aftertouch, you can go into channel pressure here and maybe make some slight adjustments. But I would say use something like aftertouch and even the modwheel when you're in a live performance situation. So if you have Bitwig open on stage, you're the synthesizer player, you'll have all your patches ready to go for all the various songs that are on the set, and then you'll have those settings like you want them. Okay, so I hope this has been kind of helpful for you guys, and we've also figured out a bit of an error in the program. And thank you so much for watching. Until the next lesson, take care.